Welcome to the College Investor Audio Show, where we talk about the biggest issues impacting millennial money, from student loan debt to side hustles to building wealth. We will show you how to get out of debt so that you can build real wealth for the future.
We have a doozy of a show today on the College Investor Audio Show. Welcome. Thanks for being a part of this. Now, we took a survey. We conducted a survey, I should say. How much Americans pay to file their taxes. Of course, tax filing season is here in full swing, and there are expected to be close to 100 million personal tax returns filed in America this year. Remember, some returns could be for married couples, some for singles, some for head of households. And with tax returns comes tax prep, of course, and we wanted to know how people are preparing their returns, and more importantly, how much they're paying for it. The IRS estimates that 70% of people filing a tax return could qualify for free file. However, last year, only 4.2 million people used it. That means most Americans are paying to prepare their taxes. So how much are Americans paying to file? And what services are they using? Does it vary based on how much you make or filing status? So we went ahead and commissioned a survey of 1,200 Americans across tax brackets and filing statuses to find out. Here's what we discovered. The key findings: the majority of Americans surveyed paid to file their taxes. In fact, 58% paid $50 or more to file their federal tax return. Only 25% of those surveyed reported filing their federal tax return for free, and 32% of those requiring a state tax return, reported filing it for free. Filing status mattered more than tax bracket. When it comes to how much Americans pay for taxes, those who filed single were much more likely to file taxes for free versus those who were married filing jointly or other tax filing status. 46% of Americans surveyed used tax software, like TurboTax, to file their taxes. A growing percentage, 11%, used a full-service virtual tax service last year, something like Picnic Tax. You can see a review of that at thecollegeinvestor.com. What tax preparation looks like in 2021. So with all that stuff in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at how people prepared their taxes. Then we can dive into the costs. So how did Americans prepare their taxes? Based on our survey, we found that 46% of Americans used tax software to file their taxes. 27% used a full-service in-person experience to file their taxes, typically a CPA or a tax service. Surprisingly, 16% of Americans still use pen and paper to file their return. Go get 'em! And an up-and-coming trend of virtual tax prep garnished 11% of people. We are expecting a huge uptick in that number this year. What tax software did people use? Given the popularity of tax software, we had to see which tax software Americans were using to file their tax returns. And by and large, TurboTax was the dominating winner. 51% of the market share. H&R Block was second, but still pretty far behind, just 14%. Woo! Given there are over a dozen major and minor tax software companies in the market, there were quite a few in the 4 to 5% range and many in the 1% or less range, which we bucketed under other. Now, it's also interesting to note that switching of tax software is not very common. In fact, 84% of those surveyed said they would be using the same software again. Only 4% said that they would be, for sure, switching tax software this year. What matters when selecting tax software? Why did Americans choose the software they did? It's not just about the price. In fact, the biggest factor in selecting software was ease of use, which totally makes sense as to why TurboTax is consistently the leader. TurboTax has the easiest to use tax software. H&R Block is very close behind, though. Price was the second factor, followed by tools and features a company has to offer. Now we ask the question, how did Americans receive their tax refunds? One of the more interesting aspects we looked at was actually how Americans receive their refunds. And while 66% of Americans opted for direct deposit, That means still 1/3 chose another way to receive their money from Uncle Sam. Of that 1/3, 14% for a paper check, 12% prepaid debit card. And then we went ahead and asked that 1/3 why they didn't want to get a direct deposit. And there were some pretty surprising answers. 54% of those surveyed simply preferred prepaid debit cards. Only 16% were unbanked and had no checking account. But 19% said they didn't know because their tax preparer didn't tell them. That's a bit shocking. Okay, so then we moved on to how much Americans paid to file their federal tax return. Now, the hard part with taxes is that there is simply no one-size-fits-all approach. With different filing status, income streams, and more, the cost and time associated with tax prep can vary enormously. It's also one of the reasons why we can't just choose one best tax software. Instead, we have a bunch of categories based on your needs. So with that in mind, here's how much Americans paid to file their taxes last year. Even though the IRS estimates 70% of people can file for free, our survey found that only 25% of people filed their taxes for free. Crazy! In fact, 58% paid $50 or more to file their federal tax return. Here's how it was broken down. First, we wanted to know how much of a role tax brackets played in the cost to file taxes. While looking at the numbers, you might assume that those in lower income brackets would pay less to file taxes, and those in higher brackets would pay more. We also wanted to see how much of a role tax filing status played in the cost to file taxes. For example, would a single person pay less than a married couple filing jointly? So, here is how much people paid at each bracket based on filing status. More numbers are coming, be forewarned. So, at lower brackets, more filers are filing their taxes for free. That's good. At the 10%, 12% brackets, 50%, half and half, of single filers are paying $0 to file their federal tax return. But by the time you get up to the top tax bracket, you're down to 16% of people filing for free. Remember, tax software like Credit Karma Tax allows free filing at all income levels, so it makes sense that some filers may still file for free at top tax brackets. For taxpayers who file married filing jointly, here's how that breaks down. And what's interesting is that for couples in the lower tax brackets, only 23% file for free. We think this might have to do with the fact that many tax companies advertise free tax software actually have a lot of gotchas, such as making you move up to deluxe versions for certain tax credits or deductions. We break down these gotchas in our list of the best free tax software. Married couples don't need to be paying any more for their taxes, especially at lower income levels. How much do income sources really matter? We wanted to examine how much income sources matter for tax filing costs. For example, does someone who only earns W-2 wages pay less in taxes than someone who is self-employed? Well, yeah. Income sources do matter a great deal in how much you pay. This is the primary way that tax software sets their pricing structure. As such, what income sources you have can dramatically change the price. Let's take a look at an example. 24% of those with only W-2 income filed for free, with 18% paying between $51 and $100. They're overpaying. But when you add investment income to your tax return, the cost Americans are paying to file goes up dramatically. With investment income, only 18% filed their tax return for free. Incredibly, 23% of Americans with investment income paid over $300 to file their federal tax return. And those with self-employment income paid the most in taxes. Sadly, self-employment income also refers to people who work in the gig economy, which can result into surprises for those who are filing taxes as a gig worker for the first time. Only 14% of those with self-employment income filed for free. Meanwhile, 22% of Americans who responded to our survey as self-employed paid over $300 to file their federal tax return, and 30% paid between $101 and $300 to file their federal return. Phew! It's statistics like this that make tax software companies like TaxSlayer a compelling offer, where they offer all self-employment forms and assistance for low prices. Now here's how much Americans paid to file their state return. 43 states require you to file a state tax return, and there are 2 states that may require you to file a tax return. Hello, Tennessee and New Hampshire, who only have taxes on investment income but not earned income. And while most of these states that do require you to file a tax return have free file programs, most taxpayers still end up paying to file their taxes. On the state level, 32% of tax filers filed their taxes for free. It's important to note, though, that this also includes taxpayers that bundled their federal and state returns, essentially making the state free. 83% of taxpayers on the state level paid less than $100 to file their taxes in 2020. 51% paid between $1 and $99. So just some final thoughts real quick. I was actually quite shocked that only 25% of Americans reported filing taxes for free in our survey, especially given the expansion of robust free file tax software options. I was also shocked by the gap in married filing jointly couples that aren't filing their taxes for free versus other cohorts. This tells me that they are definitely falling into the gotcha traps set up by tax filing companies who force you to upgrade once you start the process. There also appears to be an interesting gap in pricing, with not many people paying under $25 to file. This is companies like Free Tax USA that offer that. It seems to reflect the adoption of these services compared to the behemoth that is TurboTax. I was also shocked by the results of how people choose to receive their refund. Given that some people don't have checking accounts and many prefer direct debit, I think there is a huge opportunity to target these unbanked people with free checking accounts. I would expect to see more banking partnerships from tax software companies in the future. Might be something to keep your eye on. If you want to see a breakdown of these numbers, you can see the charts, the graphs, the pie charts. Oh, those are fun. You can find it at thecollegeinvestor.com. It's just easier than peppering a bunch of numbers at you in a podcast. Again, it's thecollegeinvestor.com. Just type in how much Americans pay for taxes. You'll find it. Thanks so much for stopping by again today, and we will talk to you again very soon.